Welcome, beauties. I'm Carla Osorno, and I am a coach and the podcast host for the Commons with Carla podcast. And I would like to welcome you here, whether you found us through something on social media or through the podcast itself, you are welcome here. So I'm excited to have you. Welcome to the Being a Friend as an Introvert class. And this is a free class that I wanted to offer because as an introvert, I have experienced some of these challenges, and over the years, through my own experience and through the conversations with other women, I thought I could help you if that's you. So we are going to jump right into the material. I have lots of notes and lots of specific things I want to share with you, as well as some stories. And so we are going to just get started. I am going to share my screen. I already clicked the wrong button. Here we go. All right. I have some slides for you guys so that you can look at the slides and pay attention to those, as well as hear the sound of my voice. I'm used to doing the podcast and not having a lot of video. So I wish I was like looking at all of your faces, but you can peek at me if you want, or you can also watch this, but you won't be surprised as an introvert that I prefer audio and not video. So anyway, let's jump in. So you are here at Being a Friend as an Introvert. I'm guessing that you either have identified as an introvert, or you suspect that you might be on that end of the spectrum. It is a spectrum, so maybe you're somewhere in the middle, or maybe just lean more towards the introverted side, or maybe you are 100% introvert and you know it for sure. But regardless, you are welcome here. So um, being an introvert doesn't necessarily mean you have the challenges that we're going to talk about in this class, but possibly you do. If you only have one, great. If you have all 10, great. No problem. You, like I said, are welcome here. So my first question for you is, are you an introvert who has experienced some challenges in friendship? Maybe for you, making a new friend is hard, or maybe you struggle with nurturing your friendships. Maybe you find it difficult to connect with other people. Maybe you prefer being alone instead of in a group, so you say no to invitations. Maybe you have lost friendships because you don't initiate conversations. Maybe you don't yet know the why, but you suspect your introversion might be making friendships hard. So those are some things to kind of identify if you're in the right place. So I am going to be sharing a lot from a book, and I'm going to tell you the name of the book in a second. But first, I want to read to you this story. All right. Montgomery, Alabama, December 1st, 1955, early evening. A public bus pulls to a stop, and a sensibly dressed woman in her 40s gets on. She carries herself erectly, despite having spent the day bent over at an ironing board in a dingy basement tailor shop at the Montgomery Fair department store. Her feet are swollen, her shoulders ache. She sits in the front row of the colored section and watches quietly as the bus fills with riders, until the driver orders her to give her seat to a white passenger. The woman utters a single word that ignites one of the most important civil rights protests of the 20th century. One word that helps America find its better self. The word is no. The driver threatens to have her arrested. "You may do that," says Rosa Parks. A police officer arrives. He asks Parks why she won't move. "Why do you push us around?" she answers simply. "I don't know," he says, "but the law is the law and you're under arrest." On the afternoon of her trial and conviction for disorderly conduct, the Montgomery Improvement Association holds a rally for Parks at the Holy Street Baptist Church in the poorest section of town. 5,000 gather to support Parks' lonely act of courage. They squeeze inside the church until its pews can hold no more. The rest wait patiently outside, listening through loudspeakers. The Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. addresses the crowd. "There comes a time that people get tired of being trampled over by the iron feet of oppression," he tells them. There comes a time when people get tired of being pushed out of the glittering sunlight of life's July and left standing amidst the piercing chill of an alpine November. He praises Park's bravery and hugs her. She stands silently, her mere presence enough to galvanize the crowd. The association launches a citywide bus boycott that lasts 381 days. The people trudge miles to work. They carpool with strangers. They change the course of American history. I had always imagined Rosa Parks as a stately woman with a bold temperament, someone who could easily stand up to a busload of glowering passengers. But when she died in 2005 at the age of 92, the flood of obituaries recalled her as soft spoken, sweet, and small in stature. They said she was timid and shy, but had the courage of a lion. That gives me goosebumps. They were full of phrases like radical humility and quiet fortitude. What does it mean to be quiet and have fortitude? These descriptions asked implicitly, how could you be shy and courageous? Parks herself seemed aware of this paradox, calling her autobiography Quiet Strength, a title that challenges us to question our assumptions. Why shouldn't quiet be strong? And what else can quiet do that we don't give it credit for? I love this story. I loved it the first time I read this book. I read that out of Quiet by Susan Cain, and I'm going to reference this book a few times. I am just like you, I'm a woman living her life. And when I read this book, I think it was the first time that I identified that I was an introvert. And it was life changing because there were so many things that I was criticizing myself for, judging myself for harshly, and accepting, criticism from others for as well, that were behaviors that are classic for or common to an introvert. And now, after reading this book, I've been on this journey to just accept myself. And I read it, I don't even know when I read it. I should probably have known that, but I don't remember. But it's been a long, long time. And it was life changing. So I do recommend this book for sure. But we're going to cover some things. Not everything is out of this book. Like I said, these are my own experiences and things that I wanted to share with you, and stories and observations that I've made from other women. But I love that story because we make assumptions, right? Based on certain behaviors about who people are and what they are and why they do what they do. And it's kind of human nature to expect people to act the way that we act. But I think that this book was not only life changing for me, but life changing for a lot of people. So anyway, this is not a book review podcast, although this is a fantastic book. But I wanted you to hear that story because you can be quiet and courageous. You can be an introvert and a friend. And so this is not meant to be a class in negativity. And this being an introvert is not a problem, I will tell you. So be encouraged. You are not alone. And we're going to jump into some more specifics about how many people are introverts and all of that. But in this class, I want to tell you what we're going to do. We are going to it is a class, first of all, if you suspect that your introversion is affecting your friendships, but we are going to define what introversion is and what an introvert's tendencies are. We're going to have a section where we study some of the challenges, the friendship challenges that happen for introverts. They happen for all people, but specifically for introverts, again, from my own experiences and observations, and make some suggestions for what you can do if that's a challenge that you are experiencing. And then the last part will be homework, which is just a couple of overview strategies that can help you to nurture your friendships using those suggestions from the study section. So if you haven't already, please grab a pen and a journal, or a pen and a piece of paper, so that you can jot down notes. You don't have to take a lot of notes from this. You can always email me and I will send you access to the information. But if you want to write down notes for yourself, things that you want to specifically remember or be encouraged by later, or actions that you want to take, and then in your homework, you'll want that pen and paper. So go ahead and grab that. I want you to participate, even though I am talking to the screen and to you via the screen. Participate and engage as much as you can, because you'll get more out of it. So okay, are you an introvert? Maybe you know, maybe you don't know. Maybe you're like me and you discovered it when you read this book. But this is the title of the book, Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop. And it's by Susan Cain. I think this is the only cover, but there might be another one. But if you're not sure whether you're an introvert, you can always go to this to her website. Susan Cain has a website. It's called The Power of Introverts. And at that website, you can take a quiz to see if you are an introvert. And so go through that. If you want to stop this video now and go do that, you are welcome to, or you can do it after you watch. So there you have it. Or if you're listening to the sound of my voice while you're doing chores, that's good too. Okay. So introversion was defined by Carl Jung in his book in 1921. Sometimes I don't know how to use the English language. Anyway, his book is called Psychological Types, and he popularized the terms introvert and extrovert. And he said that they were the central building blocks of personality. He said, he gave this definition: introverts focus on the meaning they make of the events swirling around them. Extroverts plunge into the events themselves. Introverts recharge their batteries by being alone. Extroverts need to recharge when they don't socialize enough. And so I think that is one of the things that really, really struck me, is that, because we're not going to get into this level of detail necessarily, but I've often defined myself as an introvert, and people are surprised by that. But what I say is I'm a social introvert. Like, I do love people, and we'll get into this a little bit more when we define it, introversion again. But I love people, but I recharge myself when I'm alone, and I understand the world around me by time alone, where I'm thinking, writing, processing things. So a lot extroverts would be the opposite, right? They would get their understanding and meaning when they're at the events themselves, by talking and communicating with other people, versus when they're alone. So if you didn't know this, if you are an introvert, you are in good company. 1/3 of people are introverts. So go ahead and take that quiz if you haven't already, or like I said, you can do it later. Okay, so let's define introversion. We heard Carl Jung's definition was that they focus on the meaning they make of the events swirling around them, whereas extroverts plunge into the events themselves, and introverts recharge by being alone. Extroverts need to recharge when they don't socialize enough. But here's how introversion is also defined, in a way of kind of description. So introverts are thought of as quiet, reserved, and thoughtful, right? That was surprising. I mean, Rosa Parks was that way, but you wouldn't have known it by what she did and said, right? Introverts typically do not seek social engagements or special attention. And the reason they don't is because both of those things leave them feeling drained and exhausted. And so I think it's important too, like I just described, is that the key here is that they don't seek those things. If they find themselves in those situations, they can be social, and they may look extroverted, but the key is that they're not looking for those things in order to get recharged. Okay, so this is another thing that often is used. The word shy is used to describe an introvert. And it's so commonly used that you may self-identify as shy, or you may even think you're an introvert because you are shy. But extroverts can be shy too. So it's possible to be social and be an introvert. And so I would be careful or shy away from using shy as a descriptor for this. Shyness is more about fear versus how you recharge. And that's a good way to think about it. So our focus here is going to be on being a friend as an introvert. And for that sake of understanding, we're going to define a couple of more words. So extroversion, an extrovert is often described as talkative, sociable, action-oriented, enthusiastic, friendly, and outgoing. On the negative side, sometimes they're described as attention-seeking or easily distracted, or you may have heard them say about themselves, or someone else has said about them, that they are unable to spend time alone. Then there's a term called ambivert. And I should flip my slide because I already wrote these down for you. An ambivert exhibits qualities of both introversion and extroversion, and can flip into either depending on their mood, the context, and goals. And so they are somewhere, not on either end of the spectrum, but they can kind of maybe hover in the middle and go back and forth. And An omnivert displays the classic traits of both in very specific situations. So an ambivert maybe goes back and forth, and an omnivert has traits of both, but saves them for very specific situations. So, for example, let's say that you're an introvert, but you're in a sales role. And so in your sales role job, you exhibit extroverted tendencies where you're initiating conversations, you're initiating sales calls, like you're very extroverted in those activities, but your nature is as an introvert. And so when you get home, you're really recharging and decompressing alone. Okay. So let's see, there's a little bit more. I think I already shared this part with you. I had in my notes to go back and look at this. Um, Yeah. So let me share this with you. Our lives are shaped as profoundly by personality as by gender or race. And the single most important aspect of personality, the north and south of temperament, as one scientist puts it, is where we fall on the introvert extrovert spectrum. Our place on this continuum influences our choice of friends and mates, how we make conversations, resolve differences, and show love. It affects the careers we choose and whether or not we succeed at them. It governs how likely we are to exercise, commit adultery, function well without sleep, learn from our mistakes, place big bets in the stock market, delay gratification, be a good leader, and ask, what if? It's reflected in our brain pathways, neurotransmitters, and remote corners of our nervous systems. So, that is a little bit about introversion and extroversion. And I'm sure, especially after listening to that part, that it's easy to understand why friendship would look different. If you're making all of those choices based on internally whether you're an introvert or an extrovert or where you fall on that spectrum, then that's going to affect your relationships and absolutely your friendships. And the biggest thing I want you to understand is that even though communication and work and friendships and all the things look different for you as an introvert, you're not doing it wrong just because you're not doing it like an extrovert. If you're truly an introvert, if you're an introvert on any part of that spectrum, then and you're comparing yourself to an extrovert, you're going to potentially feel like you're doing it wrong. And so I want to encourage you today that you're not. And understanding this, sometimes just that awareness can help you to flip that in your brain and start to embrace and celebrate where you're at with that. So I mentioned this book several times. I've read several sections from it. I don't think I'm reading any more from that book to you today, but I do recommend you read it. I recommend you pick it up if you haven't already, especially if this is a new concept to you. And Susan Cain on her website also has a manifesto that was pretty interesting. It's not specifically about friendship, but it is encouraging and it reminds us to see the goodness of introversion. And in a society that really celebrates extroversion, then that can be a really good encouragement. We can take courage from knowing that we are valuable contributors, we can have amazing relationships, and we are making a difference in the world. And so I encourage you to check out her site for more encouragement about introversion if this is, like I said, new to you. Okay, so we have defined the situation, we've defined introversion and defined extroversion, and we even looked at the spectrum. And so now we're going to move into study section of our syllabus today. And in this section, we are going to take a look at some of the challenges and some suggestions. So all of the basic elements of friendship apply whether you're introverted or extroverted. So if you haven't already, you might want to check out the free class that's on my site, carlaosorno.com, or you can also find it at thecommonswithcarla.com. Anyway, go take a look at that friendship basics class as a refresher. But as I've said, there are some specific challenges that you might want to be aware of and choose to overcome. And your efforts, I want to tell you, will be worth it. We are humans, we need friendships, we need each other. And so here are some of the challenges that you may experience. Maybe you're experiencing only one of them, or maybe none of them, or maybe all 10 of them. But I want you to stick with us because even if you hear it and you've already overcome this specific situation, you've adapted to it in some way, whether consciously or unconsciously, then this will affirm that what you're doing is working, that however you're caring for yourself, whatever resolutions you've made, whatever actions you've taken, you can affirm yourself and be excited. If you're struggling with all of them and you're feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm behind, then please show yourself some grace. Okay, so let's just run through these 10, and then I have a slide for each one, where we'll just kind of hover and spend a little bit more time on each one. So, um, number one, your energy is low. This is something that introverts, these are all challenges that introverts would find that would affect friendships and relationships. So, your number one, your energy is low. Number two, you find it hard to meet people. Three, you become shy or fearful. Remember, shy is about fear due to lack of experience. Number four is you hate small talk. Number five is you think of your responses later when you are alone. Remember, as introverts, we process things alone, so we often will think of things after the fact. Six is you feel awkward in groups. Seven, you prefer to be alone. Eight, you don't feel like you meet others' expectations. Nine, your friends like to go to loud places with lots of people. And 10, your friends are tired of being the initiator in your friendships. And so that's a list of 10 challenges. It's not all inclusive, but I think it'll give you, after going through through this material and hearing the challenges and then hearing some suggestions about what to do, I think it will give us all a good basis to start from. So there may be a challenge that's different slightly or a lot, and maybe some of these suggestions will help you to navigate that, even if we didn't cover them here today. And you can always reach out to me and we can talk it through. Okay, so number one, your energy is low. We gather our energy and process our thoughts and everything about the world alone. So as introverts, we thrive when we either intentionally or even casually have time to ourselves. And I say calendar because I'm a big calendar person. But when I calendar time to myself, I thrive. As adults with work and families and alone time, it sometimes feels like there's very little time and energy left over for friendships. And so that can be a problem, right? If you feel like, and you know you're right, you need to invest in friendships, but your energy is low, then you're not going to necessarily be ready to do that. Mature introverts recognize the need and make friendship a priority. And so that's what we want to become, right? We want to grow in that. And so we can recognize that our energy might be low, but we still recognize the value of friendship and we want to do something about it. And so here's some suggestions of what you might do going forward if this is a challenge that you are experiencing. Number one, decide that friendship is important and then calendar it. I know it sounds so silly, but you do have to do that and then take the steps. And so my recommendation is to choose one friend and reach out to invite them on a walk. You probably already have exercise on your list. You know that that needs to happen. And so that's the recommendation. So, and then after you do that, next week, do it again with the same friend or a different friend. You can commit to 1 hour a week to nurture your friendships. And so that's the suggestion here. Um, I personally like to also, when I block out that 1 hour for that time with a friend, I like to build in a buffer around it, because I know that I'm going to need some time alone to process what just happened. And so I build in a buffer. So my fast tip to restore my energy is a 5 to 10 minute listen to a favorite podcast or reading a favorite book, and that gets me back to neutral. I love people. I love to have conversations with women. In fact, I feel called to do that, and it's my whole brand. And so it's something that I enjoy. It's something that I get um, great satisfaction from learning about people and conversations with people. But it zaps me. It zaps me. And so I'm just real about that. Is I know it's important and I don't want to ever stop doing that, but I'm real about that. And so I just create that buffer around it. And so the suggestion here is decide it's important, make it happen, and then build that buffer around so you can care for yourself. Make sense? I hope so. Okay. Okay. Challenge number two, you find it hard to meet people. If you're living your life socially isolated and you're not initiating activities, you're not going to have a lot of opportunities to meet new people. Even at work, you may migrate to individual effort jobs and spaces instead of team environments if you're an introvert. And so, if this is you, then here are some ideas. I'm going to encourage you to put yourself out there. You've got to put yourself into new situations so you can meet new people. And so the suggestion here is, what do you like to do when you're alone? Maybe you can do that activity with someone else. So what I do, I mentioned books already, and I do a lot. I already read 2 out of a book. Like, books are kind of my jam, but I love books. I love to read. And so forming a book club helped me to connect with some friends who also share the love of reading. And from there, we've built friendships. And so we don't see each other a ton outside of our book club, but when we come back together, we're right where we left off. And so that's one way. That's one suggestion. You don't have to be a reader or a lover of books, but what is that for you? What is some activity that you enjoy doing alone that you could invite someone to join you as well? And so if you are finding it hard to meet people, then that would be my recommendation. Okay. Challenge number 3, you become shy or fearful due to lack of experience. So, when you're out of practice with having conversations with people or strangers, then it's tempting to focus on what can go wrong and then become afraid of that or shy about it. And so, the suggestion here is to try not to overthink the conversation in advance. Remember, we're processing things when we're alone. And so, we could really fall prey to overthinking things very quickly. That's another great book you can find on my website if you don't remember the title when I say it right now. But um, Don't Overthink It by Anne Bogle is a great book to help. It's for all people, not just introverts, but she talks about overthinking there. So try not to overthink the conversation in advance or while you are talking. Okay. Remember, it's completely okay to be yourself. Um, and then be honest with that person. If you don't meet new people a lot, just tell them, I don't meet a lot of new people. I work, I'm an entrepreneur. I work from my home, so I'm not around people a lot, and I just don't meet a lot of people. So your honesty, I think honesty is refreshing and relatable, and so it's okay to tell them. And then the other suggestion I like is to use humor. People like to be around real people who can laugh at themselves in situations, and you can be funny. I mean, you can say, haven't been out in a while. This is my first time out of the cave or whatever. Like, you say something that will make you smile and make that person smile as well. And so you're going to get experience by doing it repeatedly. So if you're shy about it or fearful about it, then try one of these suggestions and see if that works for you. Okay, challenge number 4 is you hate small talk. This is so me, you guys. Small talk is often conversation where people talk about the weather, sports. Maybe you can have a deep conversation about sports, but that's not my interest, so I wouldn't, or other topics. But it really doesn't matter what the topic is, but small talk is more where you're talking at that surface level instead of going deep. You may prefer, like I do, genuine, deeper conversations, and people who know each other well, excuse me, people who do not know each other well, or who are on limited time, like maybe at a cocktail party where you're just like crossing each other quickly, or are encountering some other, it's an unplanned or unscheduled encounter. You ran into someone at the grocery store or something. Like, it's tempting to just talk about those surface things because you're limited in time. But here's the suggestions for you if you hate small talk. Recognize that small talk has its place. It is a way to get to know people quickly, and that's great. And often leads to deeper conversation. On the Comments with Carla podcast, we often start with small talk. And I just confess to you that I hate small talk, but I know that it's going to go somewhere. Like, I'm being intentional, and we're talking about small talk for a very quick time, and then we're going to get to something deeper. And so recognize that it has its place. And then here's where you get to participate by asking questions that are uncommon. So, what's a common question, right? You meet someone new in a networking event or anywhere, and and the first thing they say is, "What do you do?" or something like that. And what I'm suggesting is that you can participate by asking questions that are uncommon. So instead of saying, "What do you do?" ask them, "What was the best part of your day today?" Or, "Tell me something fun you did this week." Something like that, where you can engage at a different level, and immediately you're going to be shaking things up because you're not asking the question that they're already expecting, right? And that 14 people have already asked them, and that all they did was press play on their answer because they already have their speech all set up. And so this is going to invite that other person to tell you something that's interesting and not a rote answer to a question that's already often asked. They may already answer that question 4 times in that same event. So, the suggestion again, when you hate small talk, is to take responsibility for the conversation and engage the person more fully, expecting to know their story rather than the weather forecast. Okay, so challenge number 5, you think of your response later when you are alone. So, I don't know about, maybe this hasn't happened to you, but it happens to me. I guess I wouldn't say frequently, but it has happened. It has happened. In the conversation, you respond with an answer you regret and you feel awkward about. And then later you think, oh, I should have said this instead. So here's a suggestion: allow yourself only 5 minutes to replay the conversation. Like, do not dwell on this for hours or days, or do not lose any sleep about this. And possibly all you need to do is anchor the lesson and whatever you learned from that conversation. If I should have said this, then maybe plan to use that the next time. Or if you really want a do over, then I would suggest reaching out to the person and being honest and saying you wished you would have responded differently. Share the response you wish you would have said during the conversation. I think people are generous and they're happy to listen. And so I think if you really, really want to do over, then that's what you should do. Otherwise, think about it for a few minutes, capture the lesson, and then move on. Okay, challenge number 6. You feel awkward in groups. When you're in a large group or even a medium-sized group, you don't know where to stand or what to say. So you stand there awkwardly and can't wait to leave. Or you choose to eat and drink things you normally wouldn't to feel more comfortable, and then you regret your choices the next day, further compounding your sense that group events are just not for you. So, if this is your challenge, you feel awkward in groups, here's the suggestion: create an advanced plan for your consumption and your conversation. For example, you might limit yourself to one drink and one small plate. I actually am going to an event tonight, and it is a large group, and I already know from prior experience that I'm going to feel awkward in this large group, but I can't miss it because this person is super important to me and I want to be there. And so I have a plan. And so your plan might be like mine is tonight. I'm limiting myself to one drink and a small plate. And then I'm going to get as far away from the beverage and food section as I can. And that's my plan for consumption. My plan for conversation is to make the large group, a small group by I've identified a couple of people that I love to see, and I'm going to bounce around to each one of them and have a small conversation with them. And so that small conversation, you can use the things we talked about, up in challenge 4 about small talk. You can use those suggestions, but you can engage in conversation with a small group. And so if I already know who's going to be at this party because of this particular group. And so I've identified those people already. But if you don't know, then try this. When you get there, look around and see who else is looking like they maybe feel awkward and would prefer a small group conversation. You know from the statistics that a third of the people in the room are introverts. And so find the introverts and make the large group a smaller group and engage in conversation. So use your intuition to do that. But I feel confident that you can identify them, and they may be appearing to be extroverted, but I don't know. I think you can tell. So I hope you can. And I would love to hear how this works for you at your next event. So anyway, now that you've made that a small group, then you can do, like I said, what we talked about earlier, take responsibility for the conversation and ask meaningful questions, and then listen intently. Ideally, the sounds of the large group are just going to fade away, and the time will fly as you enjoy yourself at your small group that you've created in this large group. So that's what you should do, is my suggestion anyway, of if you feel awkward in groups. Okay. This is challenge number 7. You prefer to be alone. You understand that regular isolation has negative consequences to health and well-being, but you really, 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 really like being by yourself, and nurturing friends seems like a lot of work with a host of problems. So here the suggestion is to remind yourself that it's so worth it. All the evidence is in, you guys. I'm not a scientist, but the studies are in. You are not only missing out, you're missing out on joy. You're totally missing out on joy, and you have no idea really what you're missing if you don't just jump in there and start to experience it. So remind yourself that you're missing out on the joy that comes from connection and that you want to be a part of it. And then take a small step repeatedly. Call a friend. It may be helpful to have a purpose when you call a friend. So, asking them a question within their area of interest or expertise. I personally am not a person who loves NASCAR racing, but my brother does. And there was a season, this was years ago, but there was a season when I wanted to connect with him in a different way. And so we didn't have a lot of things to talk about in common, but I knew he loved NASCAR. And so I reached out and I asked him about a particular race. I had heard something about something, and or maybe I even looked it up. I can't even remember the details. I don't remember the question, and I definitely don't remember his answer, but I do know that it was a start to new conversations with my brother. And by expressing interest in what he was interested in, it started the conversation. And so maybe try something like that with a phone call and asking a question. A lot of times, I don't know if this is true. It is true of a lot of introverts I know, but part of the reason we don't reach out right is we want it to be something that's purposeful. And so by having a reason for the call, it will help you to gain that courage to make the call. Okay, it's helpful to know that having time with another person enriches your alone time too. So I find this to be true is like we're spending this time alone processing the world around us, but these social encounters with people and friends help us to chew on that more when we come back. I fully expected this event tonight that I'm going to learn something new from someone. And then when I'm alone next, I'm going to be able to spend some time processing that. I'm going to have information and experiences from the world and the people at this party. And then I'm going to be able to, like I said, process those alone. So um, it's fine. It's totally fine to prefer to be alone. I just think it becomes a challenge when it's getting in the way of friendships. So, okay. That is challenge number 7. Challenge number 8 is you don't feel like you meet others' expectations. I think I might have missed some punctuation there, but you guys will forgive me, right? Everyone else across the globe is being social and getting together. At least that's what it feels like. Social media tells you that you should be doing something other than what you are doing. You like your life, but there are reminders and judges all around in visual images and comments from well-meaning people. So that describes this challenge is you just don't feel like you're meeting other people's expectations. Here's what Steve Harvey says. Maybe you've heard this quote but didn't know that Steve Harvey said it because that was my situation. People's opinion of you is none of your business, nor should you make it yours. This is probably great life advice, right? People are probably thinking about you much less than you think they think of you. So be about the business of living your own life. Choose your level of engagement for optimal physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual wellness for yourself. So that's the suggestion is forget what other people are saying about you. It's none of your business. And then choose what level of engagement makes sense for you. Create appropriate boundaries for social media so that you're not adversely affected by what you see and read online. This is super important, especially if challenge number 1 is also yours, where you have low energy. Don't let online connections or that sense of connection steal the energy and the contentment that you have. Save that for genuine connections. And some of those could be started online. I'm not suggesting that they can't, but what are those soul to soul or person to person or face to face connections that really are enriching? Make sure you have appropriate boundaries so that you don't get zapped of energy for that. Be clear on your own expectations for your life. What are your personal values and how are you doing with living them? And what needs to change for you? And so when you're clear on those kinds of things, then this this will be less of a challenge for you. And so that's the suggestion is to number 1, don't care what other people think. Choose what level of engagement is appropriate for you and what your values are and what you should be doing to live those values. And then have those boundaries around social media and other places where expectations would come in and play a role. Okay, so that is challenge number 8. You guys, 2 more. Hope you're hanging with me. Challenge number 9 is your friends like to go to loud places with lots of people. And probably if you're an introvert, especially if you're on the end of the introvert spectrum, that is not your gig at all. You do not want to do that. But you may have friends that you love and they're closer to extroversion and love to go out dancing or to concerts or any other loud place with lots of crowds, lots of people and crowds. You want to spend time with them, but the noise and the stimulation are simply too much for you. This happens to me quite a lot. A lot of my really close friends know it, and so they make accommodations. So we were at a pool party recently, yesterday actually, and there was music going on in the background, and the host was so amazing. He had intentionally moved the music away from where we were sitting. Well, then, oh, the smoker happened on the grill. And so we moved to a different seating area in the backyard. And it was right where the music had just been moved to. And so someone stepped up and was a complete gentleman and turned it down, so that I could focus on the conversation in the small group instead of the music being a distraction. Love music. I just am not capable of listening to people and hearing the music. Lots of people are, and that's totally fine. But anyway, it's not about me or this accommodation, but it was helpful, and it enabled me to stay in that conversation much longer. So anyway, um, suggestion here is, if it's possible to participate, do so in moderation. So loud places, lots of people, do whatever you can to be a part of that group. But if it's not possible, then my suggestion is, instead of just going, radio silent or ghosting your friends, then be honest about why you're declining the invitation and just communicate. Just communicate. Maybe accommodations can be made, maybe not. And then, uh, if you are declining, follow up and maybe suggest an alternate time. As I can't make it to that loud concert, but I would love to spend time with you. I'm going, I don't know, I was going to say to a book fair, but let's say I'm going to the beach and I would love to invite you to come with me. Can you come? And so suggest an alternate time so that they know that you value them as a person and you value the friendship, and that you're not just checking out. And then you can enjoy your friend in a different situation. So I think here the communication is absolute key. Just don't ghost your friend, because that's not going to help nurture the friendship, and that's our goal, right? Is we want to be a friend. Even though we're introverts and have those tendencies, we still want to be in communication and connection with our friends. Okay, and we've gotten to challenge number 10. Challenge number 10 is, your friends are tired of being the initiator. So it may not occur to you, because you're an introvert, to invite others or to initiate conversations with friends. Like, you're just doing your thing, you're content being alone, and you're moving along through the world. And so, I mean, I think this happens to me often, is I just lose track of time. Like, I'm completely fine reading a book all day. People are like, how can you read all day? I'm like, oh my gosh, how can you not? Like, let's talk about this, because I can totally do that. But it's tempting, like I said, to lose track of time or to spend your time doing activities that do not include others. Maybe you have had a friend who is offended or hurt by your lack of initiative. They're like, well, she must not care about me because she never reaches out. And so if this has happened to you, then this is a challenge. They're possibly thinking that there's something wrong with them or something wrong with the friendship. And that couldn't be further from the truth, right? It's just that we're dealing with a challenge that's common to people who have introversion. So, first of all, ask yourself, this is a suggestion, is it a problem with the person or the friendship? And if it is, then you should be honest with that friend and work towards resolution. If it isn't a problem, then just be honest about your introversion. Again, communication is important. My recommendation is that you apologize where necessary, and then communicate what you can do to show that you care going forward. So, I had a very dear friend who communicated that I just wasn't initiating contact. And so I just explained the reasons, and then we made a plan. And so we set up a recurring thing where I didn't have to be the initiator and she didn't either. And it was just something that was just in the calendar. And so that was a way that we were able to deal with that. So we have covered 10 challenges. These are things that all people, but especially introverts, may encounter. And I'm sure that you can think of more. This was my brain dump. And obviously, I'm just one person. And the suggestions came from my own experiences and from just observing and talking to other people who struggle with some of these friendship challenges. Okay. So, all right, we're going to jump into homework, part of our syllabus now. And that is where we're going to give you just some general strategies how you for how you can address the challenges and the suggestions that we just covered. So the first thing we did today was we defined introversion and some of the other personality types. And then we talked about some challenges that are specific to introverts regarding friendship. And now, like I said, we're going to talk about strategies. So these are general, but here it's so important. Awareness is key. I mean, I find it unlikely, but it's possible that today is the first time you're hearing or thinking about introversion. Maybe you haven't read Quiet yet. Maybe this is a new concept to you. Um, Learn as much as you can from me. Reach out, let's have a conversation, read the book, search on Susan Cain's website. But when you have awareness about introversion, then you can, that's the first step. And so identify where you're at. um, Remind yourself the value of connections and friendships. Identify what your specific challenges are. Do you have 1 and 2 only? Do you have 1 through 10? Do you have none of them? Just identify that and then take a peek at those suggestions. Again, with this awareness, you can take steps to grow and nurture friendships. One of the beautiful things about video and audio is you can just go revisit just the section that applies to you. You do not have to listen to the sound of my voice from A to Z. You can just go look at letter G or whatever. That was the wrong analogy, but you get it. Okay. And then when you have that awareness, then I'm going to invite you to press in. Press in with people. Maybe that's frequency for you. Maybe it's intensity for you. Maybe it's consistency for you. Maybe you do it, but just are not consistent at. So press in with the people. I do have out there a freebie that you can consider. If you haven't already taken it, then I would go find it. You can find it at the Commons with Carla or carlaosorno.com. Both of those websites will get you to this 10-day connection challenge. And it's a freebie when you sign up for the Commons with Carla newsletter. We send out something weekly and then also at the end of each month. And so it's not a daily newsletter at all. But um, you can sign up for that newsletter and then you can get this 10-day connection challenge. And it gives you ideas and support and encouragement for taking some steps. And so I would recommend, if you didn't already come up with, we gave you a couple of ideas when we were talking, but if you don't have a lot of ideas, then that might be a really, really good place to start. And then as you go forward, keep in mind that you're going to want to find the balance that's right for you. And so I want to encourage you to balance your time with different people. And so that could be, introverts and extroverts. People have different levels of energy for sure. And so consider consider that. Friendships between introverts will naturally offer common understanding in many of the challenge areas we already talked about. And so it's easy to talk to someone who's also an introvert about that, right? Because they're experiencing some of the same things. They're going to understand if at the last minute you're like, I need to change our plans because I overbooked myself this week and I am wiped out. And that same conversation with an extrovert would not land the same way, because an extroverted friend is energized by social time and they are not going to understand as clearly as an introvert when you explain that you need to change things. Extroverted friends may also drain your energy reserves. And so it doesn't mean you can't be friends with extroverted people, but it just means you need to be aware of your own needs and then have consideration for the other person. And then that's going to help you navigate that friendship situation. So being aware and balancing your time with different people is important. Let's say you had an event with you had a specific day with 3 things on your calendar, and all 3 of them are with introverts. You're going to come out of those encounters a little bit different than if all 3 of them were with extroverts. And so that's just the reality. It's not a judgment at all. It's just know yourself and know your calendar is my suggestion. Another area that you're going to need balance is with the time and energy you're putting towards friendships and the time and energy that you spend alone, and just managing that. And so the idea is not that you're going to go from complete isolation now to being a complete social butterfly, but that you'll find out what that balance is for yourself. What is the right amount of time for you to have alone? What is the right amount of time for a friendship? I earlier suggested an hour a week for a walk with someone. Maybe that's the right amount for you. Maybe you're you're an introvert or an ambivert or something, and you're on that spectrum, and so you want more social, that's going to be up to you. And likely, if you're like me, you're going to find out through trial and error. You're going to be really excited about specific situations and specific people, and then you're going to find yourself exhausted, and so you're going to have to back off a little bit and take care of yourself. And so you don't have to change directions completely. You don't have to say, I can never do that again, but you just simply schedule some time alone, get rested, get restored. I just spent an entire Sunday reading by myself. It was glorious. I loved it so much. I did participate and watch church with my family, and I spent a little bit of time with my daughter, but for the most part, from about, I would say, 6 in the morning until about 9:30 at night, I was just by myself reading, and it was awesome. And then the next day I was completely energized and restored, and I jumped back into work, and I interacted with people, and I went back to my calendar. So you're going to have to find that. So strategies for addressing these challenges and using these suggestions are: have awareness where you're at, press in, you got to take some action, balance your time with different people, and balance your time with people versus being alone. Okay. Here is more. This is all part of your homework. So I want you to create an action plan for yourself. So I hope that you have your pen in hand, and this is your action plan to nurture friendships. I want you to pick one thing from the 10 that you might be experiencing a challenge with, and those related suggestions. And I want you to write them down. And then once you've written them down, I want you to share your plan. And maybe you have someone in your own zip code, a friend that you can share it with, who will hold you accountable. Maybe that's your spouse or your partner. Or if you don't have someone in your zip code or a spouse or a partner, then I want you to share your plan with me. So you can DM me or send me an email. But regardless, I want you to share it by the end of today. So if you're watching this at any time before midnight, or anytime I would say where it's appropriate to send it to someone in your life. If not, then you get by the end of tomorrow, but don't go any further out past that. And then once you share your plan, you can act and then celebrate your win with your accountability partner, even if that's me. So super exciting. The important thing to remember is that you cannot fail. This is um, this is for your good. It's for your joy. It's for your growth. Imagine the worst possible scenario. And even if that happened, you are still going to be okay. And so jump into connection, jump into friendship. You really have nothing to lose. So I want to encourage you to go for it. Okay, so we have covered a lot. These little classes, I tend to get all talkative, but I want to ask you this. Did we accomplish what we set out to do? Did we meet our objectives? We wanted to define the problem, which was, what is introversion and how does it affect friendship? We wanted to study the problem by looking at some of the challenges that are common for introverts in their friendships, and then make some suggestions about what to do about them. And then we wanted to cover our homework, which is making sure that we have awareness around the problem, and that we have identified specific challenges and specifically where we're at, and then pressing into the problem by taking action, and then finding that that balance in those areas. And so I hope that you feel that we have done that. I don't have an official evaluation form to send out to you right now where you can grade me A through F, but I would ask you to share your class feedback. You can go to carlaosorna.com, leave me go to the contact form, and you can connect with me there. And then this final question I have for you is, will you choose to press into friendships using what you have learned today? Will you act on that plan that you created? Is basically the question. And I hope your answer is yes, I plan on taking action. And I hope that you, beauty, take away the most important part of today, is that introverts make wonderful friends. I may be a little biased as an introvert, but that's okay. We can live with that. You can be yourself. You can be yourself and have wonderful connections. And you can have those connections with other introverts and with extroverts. You can have friendships on your own terms and still have lots of time alone to process your thoughts and beliefs. You can confidently be with others and not expect yourself to act in ways that are not true to who you are as an introvert. So go out there and be an introverted friend and share your wins with me. You can DM me at the Commons with Carla on Instagram or email me at carla@carlaosorno.com. And I'm so excited to hear from you. And I am out there practicing right along with you as a fellow introvert. And I feel so lucky to have rich friendships and rich connections. And I hope and pray the same for you. And I know it's possible. So go out there and be an introverted friend and have a blast with it. All right. Thanks for being here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I look forward to seeing you guys out there. All right. Have a great day, everyone.